welcome to this next absolutely excellent session for Future Print. I've really been looking forward to this presentation from Ralf, and I really think it will give you some proper insights into how the economy within Europe has been faring, specifically for the print industry, which will maybe help you plan for the future. Now, to introduce you, for those who don't know Ralf Schlözer has over 30 years of experience in the graphic arts and graphic arts system manufacturing industries. He's a freelance consultant and technology analyst for the printing industry with a special focus on digital print, and is a regular contributor to Inkjet Insights and whattheythink.com. He provides insights on technology, applications, business models, and market development, and he's also an expert on market sizing and statistical sources around the printing industry. Now, onto his talk. The COVID pandemic has sent print production into heavy decline in 2020, rebalancing demand for a myriad of print application types, as well as dramatically altering the vertical markets that print service providers have been able to rely on for the last decade. The rebound did begin in May for most of Europe, but recovery rates are varying across the continent, and the destabilization of some markets has shown a very much altered demand landscape. This presentation will look at the drop and rebound rates in print production in different European countries to date, and which print applications benefited during the crisis or fell behind. So without further ado, over to you, Ralf. I'm really looking forward to this session.
Thanks a lot, Brandon, for the introduction. So the session today is on the rise and fall. Well, actually, it should be the fall and the rise again after the COVID crisis. Obviously, the COVID-19 had an immense impact on the printing industry, not only in Europe, all around the world. And we're going to have a look on some of the data there. And to have a better look at that, I would like to share my presentation here as well. The rise and fall and restructuring of print in 2020. So as Brandon said, I'm founder of Digital Print Expert, independent analyst and writer for several publications with more than 20 years experience as industry analyst, looking at the different market sectors, the different technologies, especially digital printing, but also the wider industry. So how did the markets fare? That is a snapshot of the monthly European production index. So that's very important. Revenue might be different. Actually, that should be higher to some extent, but we are seeing here the production index of the three big sectors. Well, the first one is manufacturing, all kind of manufacturing, then printing and reproduction, that's in gray, and then for the fun of it, also paper and paper products. And we can see that here, the numbers have been relatively stable. 2015 is the base year, so that means that all manufacturing is or was a little bit higher than in 2015. Printing was a little bit lower in the printing out in the total output, but not that much lower. But obviously, the Corona crisis brought a big shift, a big decline in the numbers. And general manufacturing, as well as print and reproduction, they fell by about 30% until April 2020 to sort of the 12 months before the pre-Corona level. That's a drastic decline. I haven't seen anything like that in all the print statistics before, so that it is much higher as an impact than the financial crisis, the Euro crisis, the dot-com bubble, and so on. So it is a massive impact. Interestingly, paper products, they declined much less, only 9%. So might be that is toilet paper production, which picked up a lot in these months, but the decline here has been a lot less. But how did it evolve? That is the big question. There were discussions on how the recovery should be. Would it be a V-shaped recovery, a steep decline, followed by a steep recovery, more U-shaped recovery? Well, that it would be a longer trough, a longer time until the recovery sets in? Or are we going to see a reverse square root shaped recovery, which means that from a higher level, sharp decline, some recovery, but towards a lower level, which is also a possibility. It might be pick any letter of the alphabet. It could be, at the moment, we still don't know. But let's have a look at the data we got so far. And statistics at the moment, they show numbers until July. And here we can see that manufacturing and both paper products and printing reproduction, they all picked up again, getting closer to the pre-corona level, but still numbers are 8 to 10% below the pre-corona levels in July. We still see the recovery indicators pointing up, so there will be more recovery, getting closer to the pre-corona level, but it's difficult to tell whether we're going to reach that still this year. But indicators are still pointing up to more recovery in in the time frame from August, September, October. But that's a pan-European picture, so that's EU 27. That does actually already exclude the UK. But we can have a look at some of the country numbers as well. So obviously not all 27, and that includes even some non-EU countries. And let's start with a little bit categories. Well, I couldn't resist naming them the good, the bad, and the ugly. So start with the good ones. Countries which went through the crisis with a relatively low decline in the production index numbers, or that meaning with a print output, or with a good recovery. And typically these are countries in Eastern Europe, but Sweden is also a notable addition to that area, where the lockdown has been mostly avoided. So also here print production decline only to a moderate extent, and the recovery took a little bit longer, so it only started in June, but here also pre-corona levels had been reached again. So some of the countries relatively unscarred and also doing quite well, as you can see that already pre-corona they have been able to increase the production versus 2015 quite a bit. But of course, there were a good number of countries which followed quite closely to the EU average. That's, for example, Germany, Netherlands, Austria, Belgium. Interestingly, also Italy, which was a country quite affected by the corona crisis and lockdowns, but printing production declined relatively close to the EU average, and also recovery taking place there. So that's a little bit in the mainstream of the countries. And there are also a few countries which had a very severe decline. So here, the production output declined by more than 40% during the worst times of the corona crisis. That's France, Spain, UK. Well, obviously also here, the recovery took place already. Spain, it seems, is falling a bit behind, but that seems to be an effect of the ongoing corona measures they're going on, with more lockdowns, with more restrictions. So that gives somewhat an overview how the printing industry was faring. That's the best and most recent data which is officially available for a wide range of countries. It is not a full picture, obviously. And not all packaging is included, so if some of that would be included, it might be a little bit softer, that decline. But also copy shop, in-house printing, and so on, they are also not included. So we are seeing a snapshot of a big chunk of the industry, but not the full industry. And obviously, there is a lot of trends going on in between the shops, how each shop is doing, and also how the applications are faring. So let me have a look at the applications, and it's obvious print application demand is driving the print volumes. And print is a huge market, it's a diverse market, so it is very important to have a look at different subsectors, areas there as well. Unfortunately, there is little actual data available so far on how print application is doing. There are some indications, a few data points from some country organizations there, but let's talk a little bit about the general market feeling. What we've already seen is that some of the applications and some of our habits, they will rebound post-lockdown and as the corona crisis is getting better under control. But we've also seen, or we can already sense, that the COVID crisis is a catalyst for behavior change. So things which have been pent up, like online shopping, virtualization, and cashless payments, they got a boost. So some say in a few months, as much happened as in 5 or 10 years to propel that behavior. Well, the judges are still out how much of that will really stick, but it has definitely been a big push towards that direction. And that had quite some impact on applications as we see them. So let me start with business printing, business documents. Actually, it is not a small segment. So professionally printed business cards, so not the stuff you print yourself at the office or at home, but professionally printed presentations, stationery, business cards, office documents, they are about 10% of the commercial print revenue. And of course, there has been a lot of upheaval. Home office means, and no trade shows means that certain things will be needed less, like business cards, parts of the stationery, and so on. So I expected the numbers to be a little bit lower, but I've seen some German statistics showing that it's probably going to be like 5 to 10% lower volumes in that area compared to 2019. And I would also expect that in the midterm, there will be a bit more normalization in the volumes. But the change in business habits, the change in how events are conducted will mean that this is not going to reach pre-corona levels again. So business print definitely impacted to some extent. It's still huge volumes, but definitely some slowdown. Promotional printing, also here we've seen a huge effect, and a little bit depending on also the sub-segment in here. So if you talk about anything event, hospitality related, that has been down a lot, obviously during the lockdown and the restrictions in there. I've seen in these preliminary data that brochures have been doing better. It seems like those are being sent out instead of handed out at events or being put in some other repositories. But the flyer market, the fast turnaround stuff, that has been down a lot. So at the moment, I would say the market is, depending on the country, depending on the area, down by 5 to 20%. Recovery will come, definitely, but it hinges a lot on how the event and hospitality and travel industry is recovering from the corona crisis. So that will be a more drawn out process. So initial data, initial feedback shows that inserts are doing okay. There is a bit less done in mailings, but there's definitely more done in as a collateral for online ordering. If you order bags, packages, anything online, then you usually also get flyers and some inserts material there as well. Poster, banner signage, out of house, that's definitely a huge mixed bag. So obviously out of home advertising, they came down to a grinding halt in March and April. Out of home advertising spending was down by 80% in these months, but has recovered a lot since. So over the whole year, 2020, we will see that numbers will be down, but here the markets are stabilizing again. And I assume by 2021, we will come to a relatively normal year in terms of these types of advertising. While on the other hand, warning signs, advice, acknowledgements, and all that things put up during the corona crisis, they were obviously in good demand. And that will slow down a lot, but still there will also be a lot of demand for that type of signage and advices here around, and that's going to go through 2021, 2022. Another very interesting and a little bit surprising segment in promotional was direct mail and catalogs. And initial expectations were quite good. So hearing talks at the beginning of the COVID crisis, people speculated about more consumers spending time at home. They have time to read, they have time to share, and research actually shows that direct mail during the Corona crisis was kept longer, was shared more, was read more. So that is research data which shows this is at a record high. Catalogs, similar things. That research is a little bit older sided here, but also here catalogs shared more, looked more, but volumes were down considerably. So looking at what postal service providers say, what some of the mailers say, that volumes down by as much as 20%. In cases it could even be more, but that seems to be sort of the average, and that is a huge impact. Direct mail has been shifting a little bit in some countries. Numbers have been declining before, but that's a huge impact. And in the end, it's not so surprising because marketers were cutting budgets in the crisis. No surprise. So some business just didn't happen in that time. And the remaining funds, they were simply needed to for organizations to increase their enablements to put up the e-storefronts and also make, obviously, advertising on e-media. So massive shift there. I would expect that when, as the e-channels and e-storefronts are built up, more market will flood back in general advertising, but the market is down a lot, so there will be definitely some rebound, but how much the rebound will be will also depend a lot on how the industry will be able to promote the benefit of direct mail, of catalogs, where we know there is data that has been shown, but it will still take a lot of convincing of the marketers, of the document owners, that these channels are beneficial, that they make sense in the industry, and the advertising market there is worthwhile and generates an ROI. A look at publishing. So also here in the beginning of the Corona crisis, we expected to see an increase actually in magazine newspaper sales. And actually just before the shutdown, market data showed that there was an uptick in magazine sales and newspaper sales. People wanted to get informed. People still trust, or at least the majority of consumers trust, newspapers and magazines a lot more than pure electronic sources or social networks. But the shutdown had a massive impact. So as you can see, with the news booth shut down, a huge channel was lost. The free newspapers without people commuting weren't picked up. Also, the shelf space in supermarkets became premium property. So also here, magazines had to take somewhat a backseat. So that shutdown impacted magazines, newspapers a lot. And on top of that, ad spending was cut as well, like in direct mail. So advertising spending down quite a bit. Only government spending in advertising for newspapers and magazines, that was noticeably up during that time. No surprise here. So in the outlook, most sources agree that there will be a rebound actually for both magazines and newspapers. I'm a bit more optimistic on magazines. You have to keep in mind that a huge chunk of magazines is TV program magazines, and obviously that's a declining business model. So this will take quite a big chunk out of the total magazine volumes if you discount that. But otherwise, I do still see a huge opportunity in special interest titles. Maybe not the newsstand titles, more smaller publications, giveaway magazines, but also subscriptions. So that's a very interesting market, and I would see more growth there. Another big chunk of publishing, obviously, is book printing, and here the numbers have been relatively stable. So some sources predicted some decline in book printing, but I think after the March and April numbers, where bookshop sales went down a lot during the closures, that gap which showed up here compared to the 2019 volume is closing ever since. So book sales, book interest is up, reading is up again as well, research shows. So I'm relatively confident that from about the 5% the book market is down compared to 2019 today, we will make up quite a bit of the rest towards the end of the year. But again, a book is not as books. There are different types around. So children books, they have been the biggest winner. Actually, by August, they have already been selling better than in 2019. That is something I find very nice, because parents supporting children reading books, buying books, better than pouring money into some other sources. So that has been definitely being promoted during the Corona crisis. Do-it-yourself guides were up as well. On the other side, travel books obviously down, and also some of the business literature also slowed. Some expected ebooks making a much bigger inroad, so that happened to some extent. But still, ebook penetration is much slower than predicted, and the printed book is a really quite stable market. Photo books actually, as a separate segment, that was up. So after some years of stagnating photo books and photo merchandise sales, so in the first couple of months, there was already a 3% growth, simply showing people had more time during the lockdown. A very brief look at transaction printing. Here the volumes were up. Transaction, the typical billing and regulatory stuff, you're used to that numbers were slowly eroding due to more e-transactions. But there was so much necessity to communicate that we heard from a lot of sources that transaction print volumes actually were up during the crisis. This will revert to some extent. E-transaction will become more important, although there will always be a need there to also make print transactions due to regulatory reasons, and also to improve the customer experience. And also very brief on labels and packaging. As you heard from many sources, labels and packaging, they hold up very well. Volumes were high, probably even a little bit higher in some cases. Certainly the fast-moving consumer goods sales were hardly affected. There were some decline in luxury goods, but them being smaller portions, so small volumes, that didn't really show up in the production numbers. But there has been, or there still is, a big shift for good producers in looking more at the supply chain. That is their main objective. Not being able to deliver was a big pain in the Corona crisis. So all of the producers are reshifting their supply chain, making it more stable. That means, on the other side, less product launches, less units in sale, less promotions. And for the printing industry, in turn, it means longer runs, less variety, more stock, things which have been all on the retreat in recent years. Now, all of that has been reversed to some extent. But as the situation is getting managed better, obviously there will be more launches, more activities. So that trend will get back to more just-in-time and shorter runs and more promotions. but for the time being, supply chain is paramount in packaging. And finally, a few words on other applications which don't fall into the typical segments. Decorative printing, quite in high demand as people went into home improvements. That might be stickers, wallpapers, furniture, things you put on furniture, and all kind of decorative print. So that was doing quite well. Also in high demand, games and puzzles, and there's a picture of my favorite board game shop, and they're thriving. So people had time, they played games within the family, with friends, lockdown allowing, obviously. So here we have seen a lot more print, a lot more activities, and that's likely to stay around as well as people got used to these kind of activities. We've also seen a couple of new applications springing up during the Corona crisis, like printed face masks, antibacterial, antimicrobial coatings. Very interesting. There have been a lot of developments very recently, so good to stay on top of that, and all kind of health-related products as well, obviously. So what next? That was a brief outlook on the applications during and post-Corona. And as I said, some of our habits, they will return to pre-COVID, but online certainly will have a bigger influence on all what we're doing in the future. And this will have an impact on print and how print is produced as well. A lot of print obviously is influenced by advertising, by marketing. During the time of the crisis, companies had to cut costs, cut their spending. They looked at e-enablement to make their online ordering, online channels, bring them up to speed, also to secure the supply chain, that the products get to consumers in the end. So that changed a lot of the focus of marketers. In the future, brand building will become important again, but it might be also a longer drawn out process. Looking at historical data, for example, the decline in advertising spending, pure total advertising spending after the 2008 financial crisis, it took 8 years to recover fully. So here, marketing spending is a long drawn out process, and budgets will be relatively tight also in the years to come. So I believe print will be changing, certainly less volume, but more value. And the charts I showed before was volume, not value, and value should be looking better. And my former colleague, Jim Hamilton, he wrote an interesting article on what he expects to be the creativity boom in print, that people had more time to think about channels, to think about products. And also I do believe that print will become more playful, like in the games, like in the puzzles we have seen, more decorative, more nice to look at, obviously more tactile, that is what print is for, and also more surprising. So print will need to have a higher value, and then it will stay relevant and stay relatively relevant and profitable for the industry. And don't forget, print is a huge industry, and even applications slowing down can be a big market. So not all doom and gloom, so still a big market out there and opportunities. But one thing everybody should also keep in mind, supply chain security is a big topic nowadays. So have a strategy, have plans, not only inside for your company, but also to demonstrate to your customers and prospects. That was a little bit a glimpse at the data and at trends in the different applications. There's certainly more to say, and the data will also evolve, and there will be also other types of data available. You can find more articles on my blog at digitalprintexpert.de, or on in my articles at Inkjet Insight and the European section of whatdoyoutthink.com. Thank you very much for listening.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that really excellent presentation, Ralf. I certainly got a lot out of that. It gave me a lot of insight into trends that I didn't even know were there. And I think most importantly, what this has done will give many of the delegates listening to this session, especially commercial printers in Europe, an understanding of maybe where they can look now to diversify their business. And obviously, as Ralf said, the biggest piece of advice that we are giving our members, I'm from the Independent Print Industries Association here in the UK, is that they really need to strongly understand that they have to look at where the growth is and diversify their business now. They can't wait until January to do that. They should be doing it from now and taking their staff, their operation, their capital reserves, and moving towards those markets, as you said, that still have some growth in them and some movement. So you can find out, as Ralf said, all about him. You can also do that on his speaker profile page here at the FuturePrint website. If you missed anything of this session, if you came late to it, or indeed if you weren't taking notes, you can watch it on replay within a couple of days, and you can watch all of this over again so that you can find out those key details that you maybe missed. Otherwise, Ralf, thank you again for that wonderful presentation, and we will see all of you delegates on the next session for the FuturePrint Virtual Summit.